Hello and welcome students in this YouTube session based online learning classes for UG and PG students of tourism. In this session today we are going to discuss an important aspect of tourism academics, that is demand aspect related to tourism. Students, if we are talking about demand in terms of tourism, we need to understand the context of tourism. Tourism demand can be talked about a kind of need or want being created and crafted by the suppliers and vendors of different reputations. In this context, this particular discussion is being magnified by the different definitions of different scholars. So let us start discussion on the different parameter discussion based on the different academic interpretation by the scholars. In the year of 1982, Mr. Matheson and Wall had provided a certain model. Through this particular model, he had defined the demand term or demand aspect in tourism. He defines that tourism is the total number of persons who travel or wish to travel to visit the tourist facilities away from their place or of work and residence. So in this context, this particular interpretation according to Matheson and Wall in 1982 is the sum total of phenomena of tourism by which the term demand is being derived by the exact number of the people or person in terms of their will to visit the destination or the place other than that of their own workplace or residence. So this simple approach according to Matheson and Wall, this particular theory is or of demand is based upon the certain number. So this particular demand aspect is a quantification of the numerical prospect of the demand. Here in this context, Mr. Wall and Matheson and Wall had derived this phenomena of demand to be understood as the primary concept of the number of tourists or traveler. Here, the number of tourists or traveler is to be understood by the footprint of tourists as far as international tourist arrivals are concerned. But he had or they had never interpreted what would be the exact proportion of the demand type, because they have never defined the type of tourism. So this particular definition according to Matheson and Wall in the year of 1982 is more explicit sort of demand aspect related to tourism. Okay, moving further, we will take one more definition, that is IGI Global Dictionary. They had defined term tourism demand as the number of people that plan to buy tourism product supported by sufficient purchasing power and spare time in order to meet tourism need of people. So here in this particular definition, there are 2-3 things to be talked about by this particular discussion made by this particular dictionary. Once framing this particular definition on tourism demand, this particular dictionary had defined the number of people and their prospect plan for buying a tourism product. So this is what an idea of buying probable tourist in numbers and their planning to buy the certain products and their sufficient buying potentialities. One way they are talking about the tourist potentiality to buy the certain product, and they are having that power to purchase the same in capacity. So both the ways it is to be talked about, sparing time in order to meet out that purchase. With the context of discussion, once they are having the power of purchasing for that particular tourism good, they need to have a time also to spare with that particular purchase. So this particular definition in terms of tourism demand is an interpretation of the demand in terms of number and the product being identified by the traveler or tourist, and by this particular time he or she had to have enable with that purchasing power, and in the context of that purchasing power they need to met the order of that particular type. So once you are having the power, you also need to be there on at the destination to spare the time for it. Let us talk about one more definition of tourism demand. This definition is according to Cooper and L. And Cooper and L define term tourism demand in terms of total number of persons who travels or wish to travel and use tourist facilities and services at place away from their place of work or residence. So this is a definition given by the Cooper and L. They had defined that number of people or persons those that travel or wish to travel, they need to utilize those services at that place. So this particular definition is an interpretation of the available goods, and this available goods by the name of the tourism goods that the consumer called tourist needs to avail this particular facility, which is of course not there at their place of work or place of residence. So this definition is a symbolic representation of the definition of the said dictionary. Again, I'm going to revise this definition. Cooper and L in 1993 defined the term tourism demand by the number of persons who either travel or wish to travel and use tourist facilities. They have to use these facilities and services. And for using this facility and services, one need to be there at that place so that one can define that term, one can utilize that thing. So of course a person is not there on their own place, rather workplace, rather they need to be there on the destination only. So this particular definition is into the quest of interpreting the dictionary's definition. Let us have one more definition. This definition is a definition given by Professor H.P. Gary. H.P. Gary defines tourism by two sub-terms. He have defined two terms. First of all, the wanderlust and the sunlust. So according to Professor Gary, we may understand tourism demand as a phenomena which is the desire to exchange the known and unknown, to leave familiar things and to seek new experiences, places, people and culture. So to understand the term wanderlust in terms of the definition defining term tourism demand, wanderlust needs to be understood as desire to exchange the known to unknown, something which is known for the unknown and leave familiar things and can see new experiences. So something which in terms of demand you are one is leaving for the familiar things to seek the new experience, that meant for unfamiliar experiences, places, people and culture. There are 3-4 things to be talked about. Desire to exchange the known for the unknown. For that one can leave the things to seek new experiences, places, people and culture. Lastly, he had defined the term sunlust while defining this particular term tourism demand. On the other hand, sunlust being derived by an activity or as a desire to travel and enjoy sunny places. So this is of course a definition which is there into the context of the climatic conditions, where the negative climatic conditions are always prevailing, so that the infrastructure, so that the human psychology is to look after the sunshine. As we used to state, sunshine every time. Sunshine gives us the wisdom for the thoughts as well. Let us move on to have another definition on tourism demand. Now we are going to talk about the definition of Song and L in 2010. This is more or less new definition in terms of tourism demand, and this is more complex tourism demands definition. Mr. L along with Song had defined the definition of tourism demand by placing these words like this. Demand is made of all traveling to some places, tourists and destinations. It can be measured by taking into account for 4 elements. One is people, that is tourist, one is the money, that is expenditure and receipt, one is time, that is stay and travel duration, and last one is the space, which is distance and the length of the trip. Here, this particular definition gives us the more variety of the aspect of demand. So once we are talking about all these four elements, people is an important criteria for completing tourism aspect, because it's a social phenomenon. Once we are talking about society, we need to talk about economy. Therefore, money and expenditure and receipts are the part by which the physical evidences are also there in terms of demand and demand configuration. Time is a valuable phenomena which is to be explained about the staying and travel duration, and space that meant for two different reasons, that origin and destination. So according to Song and L in 2010, demand is made up by those travelers who are willing to travel to some places. They are the tourist and they are the destination. It can be measured by talking about four elements. Necessarily they are people, money, time and space. So this is particularly a very specific definition of tourism demand. With this particular discussion, we are going to conclude this particular session today here, and after completion of this particular definition discussion, we may be able to understand tourism demand more better. For more such lectures, we shall be able to discuss further, and with a request to students to kindly come up and visualize all such important discussions all together.